crazy to think that we're already in set 4 of Divines. Been a really fun time so far, and Destined Showdown, while I will say at first I was a bit underwhelmed by especially the Destined ones compared to the Faded ones and their Divine skills, now that we're here, I'm still pretty excited to try them out. Maybe partially that is seeing what comes in set 5, but we're not there yet, so let's focus on set 4. So, as per usual, just kind of going over the lists that I plan on testing out, at least the preliminary lists, just to give you all ideas if you're interested, and I'll be doing some deeper dives later on. You can also find all the preliminary deck list codes down in the description below as well. But let's just hop right into this with Bavsargra here, because she got a new double rare support card in the Sealed Blaze Dragon Impauldio. So this card has 2 effects. Auto, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from hand. If you have a Vanguard with Sealed Blaze in its card name, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card with the Overdress ability or the Dress Boost ability, or up to 1 arms card. Discard it and shuffle your deck. So this is just extra consistency and deck thinning for the deck. Then the second skill is Auto, drop when your Vanguard is armed, Energy Blast 3, call this card to rearguard circle, and it gets power plus 5,000. So sort of a Shabda-esque effect, but does not cost any counter blast, instead costing energy, which Bavsargra hasn't had a user for other than generics thus far. So interesting card. This seems really good. Just extra ways to deck thin, so you're more likely to hit triggers, extra consistency to set up your trick moons in drop, and because this also could send arms to drop, which great, because we don't want to drive check those most of the time, or we prefer to see triggers on the drive check. This is also why I've thrown in here to test out Blaze Maiden Cindy. This was the sneak preview promo, I believe, for Divine Set 1. Might have been Set 2. I don't fully remember. I think it was actually Set 2. However, the reason I like this card is that it lets us, its first effect lets us grab back arms or overdress ability or cross overdress ability cards from drop. So mainly here we can loop back our arms or our Verlord in this instance. And it's just another option to the Shabda that also has an ability to recall itself from drop when we call out a Trick Moon from drop, specifically in this case with Bavsargra's ability. So seems highly synergistic between these two cards. So that's why I want to test it. So the general game plan of this deck really hasn't changed all too much. We just have some extra tools to help us get us there. Just double arm Bavsargra on our first grade 3 turn and just start pressuring the opponent with her crit, massive power, supported by Trick Moon and Veilord, and just beat down the opponent. I will say, just because these cards don't revolutionize what this deck does, I do anticipate it to be weak compared to a lot of the other decks that we will discuss, or that's been predominantly in the meta, because of the core of the deck hasn't really changed, and the core of the deck of just beat down with the grade 3 is out of date. But nonetheless, still excited to test it because I really do enjoy this deck. That was redundant. I really do enjoy this deck regardless. The next deck I've got to talk about here is Varga Dragres, because it got a nice new triple rare support card in the Twin Pulsive Dragon. This card has 2 effects. The first one is, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name, cost Energy Blast 3, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 grade 2 or less card from among them, call to rearguard circle, and shuffle your deck. Its second skill is Auto, when this unit is retired from rearguard circle by the ability of your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Varga in its card name. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So the first effect is what's really appealing about this card. It's deck thinning. It also can help us find our pieces, build our board a bit more consistently than just draw, because top 5 is still solid for, is solid, not still, it is solid for Vanguard. And while the Energy Blast does conflict with some of our other effects, such as the Shuda, I still think that this sort of effect is really powerful to get off, and probably a bit better use of our energy than what this deck has been previously doing. And the secondary effect is just a nice bonus to power bar Varga as it keeps swinging. Other than that, I've just kind of adjusted a few ratios. I'm trying out the Virgilia in the Ride deck just to be able to conserve cards in hand. I want to see how that feels over the Ride line. I forget what the card is called that normally goes in here. The one that was designed for this Ride line. And then the other aspect I want to talk about here is I'm just trying out some tech cards that you can see down at the bottom below. Mainly the Drag Resonance from set 2 as Varga restands. So giving the front row 10k power seems pretty good just to beat down the opponent. I wanted to see how this one works. I did see it be a major focus in decks that were still running the Durasi Glaive Dragon, the one that cannot be retired in the front row by your Vanguard's effect. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but pretty much it can't be retired by Varga's effect. and that way you combine either do of that or that and Shura with the Dreg Resonance, and you're getting some big swings in. Here, not really used as much, it's just kind of an extra power card to throw down if we're trying to kill, to combine with 1 or even 2 Shuras if possible. Just curious to see how that goes, and also still run the defensive rolling just for a defensive card. I expect to clean up these ratios if I do end up making a video discussing my performance of this list and just for personal testing in general. But for right now, I just want to leave the options open to see what I like. Avantgarda, similar to Bavsargra, got a double rare support card in Blue Deathster Sabine Merkmal. This card has 2 effects: when this unit is placed on rearguard circle during your turn, or when this card is discarded from your hand by your Vanguard's ability during your turn. If you have a Vanguard with Blue Deathster in its card name, cost Energy Blast 3, choose a strategy card from your drop and put it into your hand. Its second effect is auto rearguard circle. When your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Avantgarda in its card name attacks, this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So that second effect there is the same as Ala D'Argente's first effect, so just extra copies of this to more easily find it. Set up 2, that's much appreciated as our best attacker. And its first effect is also quite similar. This card in general is quite similar to the Ala D'Argente, though it is not the same. It's quite different due to the cost, as well as the ability it just grabs back from drop, but also has more flexibility, being able to be triggered when it is discarded. So ultimately what I decided for this deck is that I wanted to run it at 2 copies because of those factors. It really isn't as useful as the Ala D'Argente is in the early game, since Ala can find us our Death Winds, our grade 3 strategy card, while Merkmal is better suited at recurring those later in the game. Thus, I figured 2 copies is more appropriate just to find in the late game. And I still like the flexibility some of these other cards give us, such as the Surga and Dargage, as well as the Asagi Milestone. The idea behind these 3 cards at 2 ofs is that they cover being able to find different pieces across like different scenarios. Obviously, this one pulling Avantgardas from the drop. This one being able to pull stuff from Soul, specifically since this one can't Soul Blast, that can be relevant. So I figured I'd just test it out like this. Ultimately, I don't think this revolutionizes Avantgarda all that much. Really just getting the Pansmeria in set 1, I think, was the huge buff to Avantgarda. And other than that, I don't expect this card to revolutionize it past that. Like, it's just another nice option to be able to test out to see if it is a net benefit to the deck or not. Probably the Destined one I'm most excited to test is Destined one of Exceedance Impauldio. This deck list here, I synthesized from quite a few Japanese lists from their tournaments, and the general idea, of course, with Impauldio is that you're trying to build a bunch of auto mod gauges to be able to give your front row a ton of power while also thinning your deck and building your board with its first effect, and then with this Divine Skill turn combined with the Vinster, you can just do a ton of drive checks and try to pressure your opponent out with those 3 attacks overall. Going with the Panarray Dragon with the idea of this deck wants to get cards and drop to be able to bind with the auto mod gauges, so the Soul Blast is quite useful, and on that, it's just a bunch of good cards to try to make this deck work as efficiently as possible at finding, of course, the Finster and setting up the auto mod gauges, so on and so forth, and some power cards. So I don't think there's too much more I want to discuss here before just starting testing. I think this is a pretty straightforward list on what I've seen from Impauldio. Magnolia is another candidate for a double rare support card, this time with the Sylvan Beast Maya. Wow, this is going to be a mouthful. Maya Arasi. So this card just has 1 singular effect: auto rearguard circle. At the end of battle, this unit attacked. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Magnolia in its card game, cost Energy Blast 3, stand this unit, and this unit cannot attack until end of turn. So essentially, the use of this card is you swing with it in the back row, you stand it, and now it can act as a booster for the unit in front of it. I don't think Magnolia Elder is going to be the best one to take use of it, but we'll get to that in a second. But I still think it is worthwhile because it is an attack and extra power, and I was running some numbers, and it's been a bit since I ran those numbers as when it was originally revealed for Japan, and I determined that this is still beneficial for the deck, even though it is a grade 1, meaning it is less synergistic with the Alpin if we're trying to gain power off of it. And even though it's only an 8k grade 1, means it's 13k with Magnolia Elder, the 13k boost with the Magnolia Elder buff is still a net gain. It just kind of redistributes the power a lot. So I really wanted to test out for that reason. This is a bit different than the Magnolia Elder build I presented during Divine Set 1. I did throw back in the Inlet Pulse Dragon, just wanting to try that out again, give it another shot to see if I maybe cut it because I felt like it was a brick and not doing enough, even though really that wasn't the issue with the deck. The issue with the deck is it just kind of needs a bit of an overhaul, and that's definitely still going to be the case. Like, I don't think the Mayarashi changes any of that, but I decided I need to give it another chance. It really just kind of retooled the build to be able to use some power cards and really just lean into, you know, a bunch of deep draw with Inlet Pulse trying to keep up on hand. Same with the Goyle-Dote here, and then just be able to use our new power cards, Banaspati, to be able to recur our power pieces, including the Mayarashi, just put up a really strong offense. I'm also trying out the Friendship Fairy again at 2 to see if I like it. We'll see what happens. Pretty much just trying a bunch of stuff to see if my impressions back during Divine Set 1 were correct, and I adjust some ratios accordingly. Also a new card here, the Halapoi Lilikoi, another mouthful. New promo card that supports Magnolia. When this unit is placed on rearguard circle other than during the battle phase, if you have a Vanguard or Sylvanhorn Beast in its card name, cost Energy Blast 3, and perform one of the following. So one of the effects is relevant for masks, but since we're not running masks, it's not solely the one that is relevant for this deck. Choose a card with Sylvanhorn Beast in its card name and grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from your drop, call it to rearguard circle. Its second effect is auto rearguard circle. When your unit with Sylvanhorn Beast in its card name is attacked, retire this unit, choose one of your units that is being attacked, and gets 10k power till end of that battle. My thought process behind this card in particular is it's just another way to be able to access the Banaspati if we have one in drop, because now we can go our Lilikoi to be able to find Banaspati. Banaspati can trigger to then build a board, and all of a sudden, off of one card in hand, we are able to spawn 4 of our slots. And really, if we're also riding Magnolia Elder from hand, that gets us our full board. Seemed pretty interesting, but also we've got energy use in the Mayarashi, so I don't really necessarily want to be using that. And this card doesn't necessarily gain any power. The defensive trigger is kind of cool, but ultimately I imagine this is going to be more of a fringe card use. So we'll see what I end up landing on. In testing, I expect ratios to again adjust for this deck because it's very much experimental and just wanting to try out different things to see how I feel. Magnolia Masques, on the other hand, is the build I anticipate to be the better of the two, as it really benefits, or I shouldn't say really benefits, the Mayarashi, it really shines in this deck. And that is because between Magnolia Masques giving all units on Dragon Tree markers in the back row 10k, we're really just all units on Dragon Tree markers, but it will be in the back row, 10k, 5k from the Dragon Tree marker, and then 10k from Persona Ride thanks to the Serral. This card is sitting at 33k by itself. So you're swinging for 33k, and then it converts into a 33k booster. That is massive. If we can set up 2 of those, whew, even better. So I actually haven't played too much Masks, so we'll see if this is just a bad list or not. But pretty much just trying to tap into all the Magnolia Masques power play cards, just set up our Dragon Tree markers mostly in our back row. That way, once we can mask up, we can have Serral on board to get Persona Ride to the back row, set up hopefully 2 Mayarashis, at least 1, and then just beat down the opponent from there. Pretty straightforward here. That's also the reason why I'm running the Valnot, is because I just think getting an extra attack when this deck's already doing a ton of multi-attack, especially with the big numbers that Mass provides. Well, I guess for here you're getting over trigger power, but it technically could distribute to something else, but still just massive. No, I'm talking. And that, ignore that last part. You're giving over trigger power to whatever gets this effect, because 2 swings with 100 million is way better. But anyway, just getting extra attacks just really feeds into this deck just being able to win. So I figured I'd test it out. I saw this theory with the Levidras, which is similar, so I want to try it with Magnolia as well. Didn't do that with Magnolia Elder, just because the deck really needs power still, and so I like the front trigger aspect and wants to push the damage. But this deck, I think, can just go all in on the multi-attack. So I'm curious to see how this works, considering I really haven't given this deck as much time as I probably should have. Getting near the end here, Zorga got a new double rare and Sea Scissors of Deep Hades. Simple 1 effect, active Vanguard Circle, Rearguard Circle once per turn. If you have a Great Rearguard or Vanguard with Zorga in its card name, retire 2 of your other rearguards, choose a normal order from your drop and put it into your hand. Before I get into the implication of this deck, I like that it just says Zorga, so it can work with the old stuff as well, which is kind of cool, even though obviously Zorga Nadir is just better. But I still like that just for ability to build old Zorga decks if you really want to. But getting to the implications on this deck, I don't see this being more of a tech card. Might not even make the final cut, because the Seabreeze Abduction, just being able to bind an order, is just more highly synergistic for this deck. So ultimately, I decided to run as a 1-of to see if I like it, because being able to just recycle other pieces on board isn't too bad. Like if I'm not necessarily intercepting with these Impending Karmas, or I have a Roaming Prison Dragon, yeah, I can retire 2 stuff, and I want to retire 2 stuff to loop back orders. So I decided to cut what is that card called? Is the grade 2 order Command and Death's no. Command and Death's Restraint? That's not it, is it? Should have left the card up here, but pretty much just the grade 2 order from set 13, where you get to send the top card of your deck to your drop and either add an order from your drop to your hand or call a unit with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard. I believe that's the text on that card. Just with the idea that they serve the same purpose, but this one frees up an order slot, so I don't have to use an order with it. Instead, I can just revive this maybe with Zorga's effect, and then just loop back in order anyway, just a fail safe there. I imagine this works a bit better in decks that lean a bit more into the roaming Prison Dragon, which is this not. So I'm still just kind of feeling out which direction I want to take Zorga, which one do I want to prefer. So I could totally see maybe leaning more into this, maybe bumped up to 2 copies if I'm going more into the roaming Prison Dragon, or maybe cutting it for the order instead if I'm sticking with a Karma build. Really, I'm just testing out a bunch of stuff to see what ends up sticking and what I like. And but regardless, this is no more than just probably like a 2 of text slot in the event that you need to loop back an order from your drop. And a unit card makes the most sense. And the final deck I have to showcase here is the Destined 1 of Infinity Levidras. This one, I was debating if I really wanted to try it or not. Really wasn't that impressed when I first saw it. Like, the Infight Archers were interesting. But then the Destined King came out, and I saw it used in one of different fights, Duck fights, and I was like, all right, I kind of want to try this card out. Like, it seems like it's pulling some interest stuff from Magnolia, but taking its own spin on it, so we'll try it. The deck I synthesized here is from, or I might have even just full-on net decked from one of the lists I saw now that I think about it, is the one that's using the Crumbling Sea, because this is just a big beater, being able to gain plus 15k, because this deck can play a normal order, call a rear guard from drop, and hits 4 battles a turn or more because of our Foxel here and our Onfall and Terrorgaster creating multi-attacks as well. So just figured this seemed like a nice list to test out, see what I think of this deck. Really, I'm just kind of picking it up because I'm more curious to see how the Destined King build works out. But if I'm going to pick it up now, might as well try it out as is. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. While that was the last deck list, I wanted to talk about a few decks that I don't have on here despite owning the decks in person. And the first one is Reziel. It did get a new triple or support card here in Knight of Perspicacity Catullus. When this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you have a grade 3 or Vanguard of Reziel in its card name, choose one of your units and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. If it was placed by your Vanguard's ability, it gets power plus 10,000 instead of 5,000. And then the back row rearguard circle continuous. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard of Reziel in its card name, this unit gets intercept and can intercept from the back row. So this card, I just don't think it covers such a niche scenario for Reziel to not make it worth running. And because I think the whole idea behind this card is that it's a great option to be able to call off a Reziel skill if you're at exactly 2 damage, so you can call a grade 2 and this, or if you're even at 1 damage, so you can call a grade 1 and this. And there you can just get some power, it's some extra defense, so on and so forth. That being said though, because it's for that exact scenario where this card would be appealing, and that situation takes place early in the game when you're at lower damage, that encourages you to run more copies of this card to be able to find it for those scenarios. However, past that scenario, you're not calling this card. And to begin with, what it does, I don't think is all that exceptional. It gives 5k, maybe even 10k, but that even puts it anywhere from 11k to 16k worth of power, which is, it being a 6k on its own is kind of awkward. And the power gain just makes up for that, and maybe an extra 5k, which really isn't all that appealing. And then the intercept from the back row for just a 5k shield, I mean, it's nice, but ultimately, I just don't think Reziel really needed this. It can just do better things than this card can, even at low damage. Like, it can loop back a crit trigger to put to soul if it needs a soul blast, for example. Not the best scenario, but even just calling out a 5k trigger and then overcalling it also works. It's not as much power, but again, it's more conducive with what the deck is trying to do. I think it really just ties back to this is just trying to hit such a niche scenario that it just ultimately won't end up being worth it. And thus, I'm not that interested in trying it out. I'll just wait till next set when I think Reziel gets some more interesting support cards. The other deck I am not testing is Hexorb, despite getting the Henagon Saturate Sorceress. This card has one effect when this unit is placed on rearguard circle. If you have a Vanguard Sorceress in its card name, costs Counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 grade 3 card with Hexorb in its card name, reveal it, put it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. So this is a version of a set like OG, or not Divine's Overdress set 3 double rare the Hex Orb got, but that card can only search out Hex Orb Sorceress by name, and thus this one can also search out Aquamarine. Not very interesting card design in my opinion, but that's a topic for a whole other video. But in terms of why I'm not testing out Hex Orb with this card, it's because it shuffles. So the scenario where you're fine shuffling is in the early game before you've started pushing cards to the bottom of your deck, and there's still plenty of cards in Hex Orb that I think is optimal to run, where you will be pushing cards to your bottom of the deck, and those are going to be normal units, so you don't want to shuffle those back in your deck. Putting normal units to the bottom of your deck is essentially as if you're removing them from your deck in terms of being able to calculate trigger odds. So I don't want that. And either way, because this deck filters through the deck so efficiently, a lot of times it's not that difficult to find your Aquamarine anyway to need a pinpoint searcher with that downside. So I think I went off a bit there from how I originally tried to present this, my reasoning for not wanting to test this out. And that is because that means you really want to find this on turn 2 to be able to play it to search out your Persona Ride. I mean, you want to run multiple copies of this, but then you're running multiple copies of a card you're only going to use on that turn 2 and not later. And for an upside, as I mentioned, that I just don't think Hex Orb is absolutely, like, obviously pinpoints are just great, but it's not like Hex Orb didn't already have efficient ways to be able to dig for it. So thus, I just don't think this card is worth running. And either way, I think Hex Orb needs a bit more support, like maybe some more great ones, but what Aquamarine does is still solid, but Hex Orb needs a more significant support than just more consistent Persona Ride searching. Maybe some more power rear guards. I did want to briefly mention the Proud Familiar Kura Kamina for Hex Orb here, because I think this is actually the more interesting support card. I wish it was a grade 1. Because when this unit is placed on Rearguard Circle, if you have Vanguard Sorceress and its card name, look at the top card of your deck and put it on the top of your deck or into your soul. Then act Rearguard Circle once per turn. If you have a Vanguard Sorceress in its card name, discard a card from your hand, reveal the top card of your deck. If the real card has Sorceress in its card name, put it into your hand. This could be a really interesting filter tool to help push through the deck. However, unfortunately, the specifications of the card don't quite line up. Specifically with that second effect, there's only so many Sorceresses in the deck, and in fact, I can only think of your Vanguard, your Aquamarine, Pentagleam, and then the Delta Append. Other powerful cards for the deck, such as Effulgent Wizard, is a wizard, not a sorceress, which makes this card a bit awkward. If this deck was full of sorceresses, sure, extra way to help you dig for more cards. That could be pretty cool. And I do also like this idea of putting to top of deck or soul, because the other reason I was even looking at this card was I was like, all right, how many of the cards now are still shoving to bottom of the deck versus putting into soul? Because if we're just kind of dedicating to pushing stuff into soul, then we're not stacking our bottom of the deck, meaning it's more likely okay to shuffle our deck with the previous card, which could also be deck thinning. However, there's still just the cards I think are optimal are still pushing to the bottom of the deck, which ultimately means that it just isn't worth it. But hey, maybe this card might see a bit of use in the future if Hex Orb gets more sorceress support cards and even more ways just to kind of shove more cards into soul. It's always possible, but for right now, it's just not there. But that is it for the preliminary deck list that I plan on testing in Divine Set 4. And now I want to pass it on to you all. What are you excited to test in this set and why? If you've enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you're notified when I do upload more content. But with all that being said though, look forward to more content coming out real soon.